Ethiopian Airlines is the largest airline in Africa, with over 150 destinations worldwide. The airline rating website Skytrax deemed them Africa's best airline in 2023. As one might expect, they're a massive point of pride for Ethiopian citizens. My father-in-law described them as a national emblem. So at the end of my trip to East Africa, I was very excited to fly them from Ethiopia's capital of Addis Ababa to Washington Dulles. But does this flagship airline hold up to its lofty reputation? The only way to find out is to go for a flight. Ethiopian Airlines is based in Addis Ababa's Bole International Airport, located to the southeast of Center City. The name Bole refers to the district that surrounds it, a stereotypically rich neighborhood that happens to be home to one of Ethiopia's biggest amusement parks. Besides the two passenger terminals, the airport includes facilities for Ethiopian Airlines Cargo Division, a prestigious flight school, and the Ethiopian Skylight Hotel, the largest hotel in the country and a perfect spot for a date night. A Douglas DC-3 is on display outside the airport, and Kelkadon's dad very graciously went around this roundabout a couple times so I could get this shot. This dates back to the earliest days of Ethiopian Airlines. After Ethiopia had rid itself of its fascist Italian occupiers in the early 1940s, Emperor Haile Selassie wanted the nation to have its own airline. In 1946, Ethiopian Airlines began operation through a partnership with Trans World Airlines, a US-based carrier that's now part of American Airlines. In the early years, TWA played a heavy role in operating the airline, with flights even having TWA pilots from the States. I can only imagine it went something like this. Good morning and salam nachu from the flight deck. This is your Captain Glenn Rogers speaking. We're looking at a smooth flight up into Mekele. Amasaganalo to all of y'all for flying Ethiopian Airlines. Now here's a thing about Ethiopians. They never travel light. Since there's a lot of stuff in the US you can't easily get in Ethiopia, and vice versa, travelers between the two tend to pack a lot of items for themselves, loved ones, and friends, no matter which direction they're traveling. So between me, Kelkadon, and her two sisters, we had so much luggage that a family friend had to wrap it under a tarp and take it to the airport in the back of his pickup truck, and we arrived several hours early to drop it off. Bole Airport Terminal 2, which sees most long-haul international flights for Ethiopian Airlines, was largely deserted in the middle of the afternoon, likely because most of the international departures were late at night.
Why did the security person think I was Chinese? Do I look Chinese?
There were a few other families with baggage, though, and I noticed several people checking injera makers, special griddles for making the country's iconic flatbread, as one of their bags. Notably, the airport featured a designated drop-off lane for African Union and United Nations diplomats.
This is just 5 kilos by itself.
What is that?
It's honey, Ethiopian honey.
That's
organic.
Honey?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's really heavy.
They carry honey in bags.
But what are we gonna do?
That's a lot of honey, honey.
After a farewell dinner with Kelkadon's parents and grandparents, we made it back to the airport.
This is my personal item tonight. And Kelkadon has one too. That was last weekend, Kelkadon.
The terminal was definitely a lot busier now, so I was really glad we'd already dropped off the bags. It was here that I noticed the signage was in 3 languages: English, Amharic, and Chinese. China has played a pretty central role in a lot of Ethiopian infrastructure of late, including the nation's railways. More about this in 2 previous videos. Since security was on one end of a very long concourse, we had to walk.
I mean, I am holding both of them on my arm at this point.
And walk.
Is it just me, or does it feel like we're in a Home Depot?
It's so packed. So many people.
And walk.
We still have to walk all the way down there.
And walk.
There's more security. This is security level 4.
Then we were randomly selected for another round of security and bag searches. I wonder if it was because I was filming in the airport.
Okay, we've now been through 5 checkpoints.
Yes, and I am limping. But you know, it's for our own safety, so I'm very happy.
Finally, we made it to our aircraft, a Boeing 777-300ER. This is the largest aircraft type in Ethiopia's fleet, which made sense as Washington, D.C. is home to the largest Ethiopian diaspora community in America. The airline ordered a fleet of Boeing's even bigger 777X aircraft in March 2024. Inside, the airline's iconic green seats were arranged in a 3-4-3 configuration, and each seat came with an in-flight amenity kit and a pillow. We pulled out of the gate as a safety video played, with alternating English and Amharic narration. Besides the 777, Ethiopian operates the de Havilland Dash 8 and Boeing 737 for shorter flights, and the Boeing 787 and Airbus A350 on longer flights. This Washington flight tends to rotate between the 3 wide-body types. Then, before we knew it, The engines were revving up and we were taking off, heading westward into the night. Since it was late and my IFE wasn't really working, I tried to get some sleep, but this was difficult as the cabin was really, really warm. It had been like this ever since we'd gotten on board, and it took over an hour before the inside cooled to more typical on-board temperatures. As far as Calcadon and I remember, no announcement was ever made explaining the cooling failure or how long we were meant to endure the heat. Partially due to our sweltering conditions, I became really dehydrated, so I asked a flight attendant for water. She didn't return for more than 20 minutes, and I ended up having to track her down in the galley to get the fluids I needed. When mealtime came, I chose the chicken and rice, which came with a sort of pudding dessert, a roll, and another bowl of rice with different flavoring. It didn't taste that bad, but there's like a 50% chance it's what laid me out with food poisoning when we got back to Boston. Then, long before we were anywhere close to Washington, our plane began to descend. But before I show you where we landed, I wanted to take a moment and thank all of my Patreon supporters who helped me go to Ethiopia. It was an amazing trip, and if you'd like to contribute towards my next one, you can join for as little as $1.80 per month and get instant access to early videos and bonus content. So here's the thing about Addis Ababa. It's really, really high above sea level, about 7,700 feet. That's 2,500 feet higher than Denver, Colorado. When your airport's that high up, the air is thinner, meaning that the lift generated under the wings of an aircraft is going to be less. If you have a plane full of passengers, injera makers, and enough fuel to get to Washington, all of those things generate more weight than the wings can lift in the thin air, and the plane can't get off the runway. So on their way to America, Ethiopian Airlines needs to make a stop to refuel. Once we'd landed on the Emerald Isle, we taxied around a few cargo aircraft and pulled up next to a pair of Ethiopian ones. Fuel trucks arrived, and as jet fuel started pumping into the planes, flight attendants specifically asked people to unbuckle their seatbelts. I wonder if this was to make sure we could leave the aircraft in case of an emergency. I headed to the bathroom to brush my teeth, using the amenity kit I'd received at the beginning of the flight. Unfortunately, I never did an unpacking video of this. Back in my seat, I enjoyed the breakfast we'd been provided, a slightly squashed muffin containing about 4 or 5 raisins. Fueling finished as the sun rose over Ireland, and we taxied past the passenger terminal heading towards the runway. Ethiopian Airlines only refuels in Europe on westbound flights. Since Washington is closer to sea level, flights from there can proceed directly to Addis Ababa. Since I filmed this, Ethiopian has moved their refueling base from Dublin to Rome. Back in the air, we enjoyed some early morning sunlight, and flight attendants handed out tiny plastic-wrapped chicken sandwiches. Calcadon also tried her first tomato juice.
Guys, I feel like I'm drinking pasta sauce.
We eventually discovered the little sandwiches were better dipped in this.
Okay, now for Caleb versus in-flight entertainment.
I'm Caleb's in-flight entertainment.
Unfortunately, my IFE still wasn't working. The touchscreen was unresponsive and the armrest was unreliable, even failing to switch my overhead light on. At least the airline still had an in-flight magazine, complete with a fleet breakdown and destination map. And Calcadon's IFE was working well enough that we could watch the Emperor's New Groove together. For the final meal service, I chose chicken and rice again, which came with a bean salad, a roll, and some cookies. A couple movies later, we were descending into North American airspace, and before I knew it, I was seeing the farmlands of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania out the window. It was truly surreal to see me and my girlfriend's childhood homes from the same vehicle, even though we grew up on opposite sides of the world. So what are my final thoughts on Ethiopian Airlines? Well, they're mixed. The flight was smooth and on time. The luggage allowance was generous. The food was edible and only maybe made me sick. And the airline itself has an impressive network and fleet, pushes African aviation into the 21st century, and invests in smaller airlines all around the continent. It's truly a company that Ethiopian citizens can be proud of. But at the same time, the airport experience wasn't the most thoughtfully designed. Seriously, why did they put the security checkpoint way down at the end of the concourse, and did the airport designers not know about moving walkways? And then there was stuff like the cabin overheating, my IFE and overhead light not working, flight attendants failing to help me when I was dehydrated, and the food just being sad. These kinds of things wouldn't lead me to say an airline is bad. Far from it. I would fly Ethiopian again for sure, and I hope to try their regional service next time I'm in East Africa. But if I had to give Ethiopian some constructive feedback, it would be that little details go a long way towards giving people a pleasant travel experience, and if my flight is any indicator, they need to work on that. There's something profoundly bittersweet about the final descent from an international flight. You're back in your world now, experiencing the first moments of your trip becoming a complete memory. And what a memory this journey was.
Wagakanis, ere wagakanis.
So yeah, it's
I actually got a discount on my Habesha clothes from that.
Yeah.
Okay, I would rather forget the raw goat liver. Traveling to Ethiopia was my first glimpse into a culture, language, and group of special people that I knew I would have a long future with. I'm probably going to be back there before too long. But right now, we were passing the Air and Space Museum and reaching the runway. Tired, disoriented, full of new memories, and home.
Go to the